Hello and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Sin.
I'm Axiom.
And today we are concluding at last our rather lengthy discussion of Terry Pratchett's Hogfather and our playthrough of Pokemon Christmas.
So, how are we gonna wrap this one up?
With a pretty bow, 'cause it's Christmas.
Does Typhlosion's neck fire count?
Well, no, because it's not going to last more than a few minutes and we're going to have something else to end on, I assume.
Yeah. I don't think we're gonna have time to do the Elite Four. Not in one episode.
So we'll have to do that when we do their next Christmas book. But yeah. But we'll come back to that eventually. I mean, some things are always the same. Such as death. No one in the end can escape death. And that's kind of something that comes up quite a bit here, is Death gets to see pretty much firsthand the difference between the two roles he's playing in this book. Because death comes to all, no matter who you are, no matter what your class is, no matter what your status is. You will eventually die, no matter how hard you try to escape it. On the other hand, the Hogfather gives out a vastly different array of gifts, depending on who you are. And Death seems to struggle with this idea when Albert tries to explain it to him, because as Death is used to just, I give everyone the same treatment and escort them on, he's not used to everybody getting different treatment, and does not understand why do the rich kids get all of the good presents and then the poor children get almost nothing.
And he is not particularly enthused by Albert's explanation of how this works or why. Welcome back to the party, Tea Time. Albert attempts to explain how, well, part of the nature of the Hogfather and the fantasy associated with him and all of that fun stuff is still limited by the financial burdens of the actual real people the Hogfather's legend is to emulate. Finally getting rid of Mudslap. Death, who, as Sint said, is a creature who already is non-partial and gives the same results to everyone that he encounters, is not particularly convinced by Albert's argument, which, to be fair, it's not a great argument. But this is not the only time that Death is particularly unhappy by the inequalities that he sees in the Discworld. There's two particular scenes I'm thinking of. There's the first is the scene with the king.
Yes, that guy.
So, to kind of recap, there is a section of the story where Death and Albert are delivering gifts to an older man, an old hermit, And when they arrive there, the hermit is being badgered by the local king to try and give him a gift that he will then be indebted to the king for, and the old hermit is not particularly interested. They intervene, basically drive the king off and scare him half to death, and then give the old man his gifts and then some. Pardon me. And correct me if I'm misremembering, but I don't recall what they do beyond that with the king or with his own gifts. Do you remember off the top of your head?
I do not remember, no, sorry.
Okay, I'll look it up in post and just write the info, put the info up in text. I have made a mistake. Never mind! King's Rock saves the day.
Yay!
Speaking of kings.
So yeah, you thought of, the king. My thought was the little match girl.
Well, as I said, there's two incidents, but the other one was not the little match girl, so you can go ahead and then I'll do my other one.
So, in basically every version of the Little Match Girl, including this one, the reason she's out there alone, freezing to death on Christmas, is that she is trying to sell matches for pennies to survive. So she's only out there because of vast wealth inequality. And she basically serves as a morality tale for the people who are wealthy enough to have at any point come out and, you know, bought a match to keep the little girl alive, but were comfortable in their houses, ignoring her suffering outside. But look how happy she is. She's gone off to heaven. Isn't that great? And we can feel self-satisfied because she's happy and the angels sing. So, yeah, it's one of those situations where inequality is glorified at the expense of the person getting the raw end of the stick.
Yep. Justice is excused because it gives a good message about how justice is not served.
Yep, and Death says absolutely frickin' not to that, goes through, saves her life, and hands her off to the Watch to take somewhere warm and get her fed. So,
and then throws snowballs at the angels.
Yep.
When they do show up.
Yep, because they could have done something at any time. But nope, they're just here to celebrate.
So, the other incident that I was thinking of was with the beggars. About 3/4 through the book, we are introduced to a group of beggars. I can't remember their names at the moment, other than Foul Ron, Mr. Millennium Hand and Shrimp. But there's 3 others. One, I think, is just called the Hat Guy, or something like that.
The Duck Guy, I think.
Duck Guy, yeah. Because he's got a duck on his head. And then the other 2, I can't remember their names. Again, I'll put them up in post. But they are doing their beggar thing on Hogwarts Eve, going around trying to get enough generous contributions from people as they go around singing Christmas, or Hogwarts carols, rather, and holding out their cups for contributions, and Pratchett does point out that these are just as much to get them to go away and stop singing, because their singing is not exactly good, as it is to celebrate their seasonal spirit and to thank them for the entertainment of their caroling. Because this is Pratchett, and he likes himself some social satire and gentle subversion. So when Pratchett comes along, or not Pratchett, well, yes, Pratchett, but that's not what I meant to say. When Death and Albert come along to deliver their gifts to these beggars, they are also planning to stop nearby at a rather fancy get-together of some wealthy folks in Ankh-Morpork who are having a Hogswatch dinner. And Death decides he's going to have a bit of fun with this. Death switches the food from this fancy party with the scrounged together scraps, old boots, flavored mud, and other generally unpleasant sounding things that these beggars were going to subsist on the Hogwatch holiday, so that the beggars now have themselves a legitimate feast. And this fancy restaurant has a kitchen full of basically garbage.
Which they proceed to market as foreign cuisine and sell anyway.
Yep. The beggars enjoy their miraculous meal and celebrate their Hogwatch together, praising their miraculous fortune. And, as Sint said, the restaurant breaks down the scraps into whatever they can get together, and still manages to get by convincing all of these rich people that, oh, it's just something foreign.
I mean, if you've seen some of the more out there, like, molecular gastronomy, high art concept restaurants, you can see where the satire isn't coming completely out of left field.
Oh, I would believe it. I have no experience with cuisine, but I would believe it just from general societal.
I know quite a lot about cuisine. I have gotten many kids' cuisine and lean cuisine TV dinners in my time. That makes me a connoisseur.
I will take your word for it. Oh, crud, that's a whirlpool.
It's swirly.
So, this bit is particularly notable because of a part of the ensuing conversation. Death is pulling this switcheroo off, and Albert is basically giving him the same response that he gave when Death came up with the idea to save the little match girl of, you're not supposed to do that. And Death says, you thought it was a good idea when I showed that king the door. Albert tries to make an excuse that was different, and then again continues to try and argue, and Death points out it wasn't stealing, it was redistribution. It will be a good deed in a naughty world. Death literally took from the rich and redistributed to the poor. And Pratchett didn't even bother to cloak that in euphemism. If you had any curiosity about where Pratchett's politics lay, there you go. And it makes sense that Death would think this way and behave this way. As we said, he is the ultimate equality. The highest emperor and the lowest beggar or dying child are all equal before death.
Maybe that's why you always have these stories about rich people trying so desperately to stave off death. Because in the end, you can't take it with you. And you are worth exactly as much as the next rotting, festering corpse.
It's also kind of plays into the stereotype of playing a game against death for your life. Do you think the poor working people have access to these games? And even if they do you think they have the time to get good at them?
See, that's why you challenge Death to Calvin Ball.
I'm not sure Death would play Calvin Ball. Though...
Why? Because he was having trouble with chess?
Death seems to, he needs that stability, and, well, he's happy to throw sand in the eyes of the auditors when they're trying to enforce rules a little too tightly. I'm not sure he'd be quite as enthused with the, open opposite of throw everything in the wall and if it sticks, you get points of Calvin Ball.
Though, on the other hand, is there anything more human than Calvin Ball? And Death is fascinated with all things related to humanity.
Oh, I think he'd love to watch it.
Is honestly, I do think, because Susan does comment on this a little bit, Death is also fairly naive. And Albert notices this, which is why we have so many problems with him trying to understand the concept of the Hogfather and, basic wealth inequality. But Death tries to do things without fully understanding them. I think the one person would probably get away with playing Calvin Ball with Death. Death would probably learn after that, but one person could probably do it.
Yeah, that's fair. The other thing is, Discworld Death goes and turns this on its head even more. He does the whole play chess against death to avoid dying thing. And it's clear that he doesn't really know his way around the game of chess. Tell me again how the little horse-shaped ones move. He doesn't really understand the game, and he's... confused by the whole thing, and etc, etc, etc. But then, I forget which book this happened in. It was one of the early Death books. It might have been Reaper Man. It might have been more.
The thing is, I'm not actually sure, because Death actually makes a cameo in every Discworld book, so he could have just had it as a one-off comment while something else is happening in a not-Death book.
Maybe. But he was playing chess against a would-be dying soul, and he loses the game, and then he stands up and says, well, that was fun, let's go. So, the rich person tries to do the whole win a game against death for your life thing. Death humors them, and then takes them anyway. So, when he says all are equal before death, he means it. There are not exceptions to death coming to collect. Now, there are exceptions where death doesn't take you because you are destined for something else, such as the one witch book where he shows up, the guy dies, and he's like, well, I was just here to make sure that you died on time and all of that fun stuff. You're destined to become a ghost. Bye. But even then, he did his job. He made sure the guy died. He was there to observe, to make sure he became a ghost as intended. And he bid him farewell. As long as things are following their expected pattern and things are going according to plan, he's done his job, and he does his job regardless of the status, power, privilege, or wealth of the person that he is there to collect on.
Which makes it make sense that of all the forces of nature in the Discworld, death is the one to oppose the auditors when they step out of line.
Yep.
Everything is fair, and you're not following the rules. So, I can bend them too, because you did it first.
Yep. But I think that's exactly the kind of place to end this on, is just a recognition of death is irrespective of persons. And he makes a point of, several times,
reminding us of that.
And of pointing out that he is also not anyone's enemy.
Except the auditors. But
Well,
they started.
They started it, and they're also, not mortal, so he's not there to collect their souls, because they're not, alive.
Yep.
But for the living, death is not their enemy. He is there to do his job, and in many ways, he is a mercy. And he is also there to be a comfort and a guide for what comes next.
Yep. For all that we associate the image of the Grim Reaper, this hooded figure with this gleaming scythe, is representative of the end of everything, you are done. It's also, can you imagine taking this journey without a friend?
And it's why, when Pratchett did finally pass, almost every depiction of the end of his life came with the image of death. The death that he wrote about, the death from his stories, the death that he made sure all of us would know was a friend. And that...
What better send-off could there be?
And to many of us, it was a comfort to know that this man who brought us so much joy and happiness and comfort and taught us so much with his stories had been put into the hands of someone we could know and trust would take care of him.
GNU Terry Pratchett.
Rest well, my friend. You've done everything we could have hoped you would. I think that wraps things up here. Sorry for kind of getting emotional there at the end.
I mean, there are worse books to do it on. Hogfather is special. Like, it's a special story, but it's also very special to both of us. And I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of for that. We will resume next time with returning to Hogwarts. Until then.
Happy Hogswatch, and to you a grand new year.